Hi everyone, it's Hessie Jones, and tonight is our GenX think tank, and today we have all ladies on our panel, and we're going to be talking finance, specifically spending and saving. We had done this hangout a couple of weeks ago, and unfortunately or fortunately, we actually had a lot of males in the panel, and so we got perspective mainly from the male side, but I thought, you know what, we kind of have to even it up. And I want perspective from the ladies as well. So I'll give you a little bit of background, but before I start, I want to let you know Lori Dillon-Schock is going to lead the discussion, and so she'll lead us into intros and format. But I'm just going to give you a little bit of background into what we're going to be discussing tonight. Okay? So as we all know, Gen X for the most part grew up in an economy that was volatile. When I say volatile, probably 2-3 years in our adult lives, we've actually gone through some sort of recession. So we're really familiar with the ups and downs of the economy, and it's wreaked havoc on and I don't put that lightly, because it has wreaked havoc on not only our personal lives but also our careers. So what we're going to discuss in this panel is how Gen X is faring. Specifically, what do they value? Because this will determine how they choose to spend, how they choose to save, and how they choose to live. We're also going to take a look at how they define luxury, and more importantly, like whether the decisions are changing compared to how they were raised. All right? So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Lori, and then you can start leading the questions.
Great, thank you. Well, let's start by doing a little bit of an introduction so we can introduce our names. And if you could, talk a little bit about your family structure at a very brief level. So if I were to start, Lori Dillon-Schock, I'm helping Hessie out. I'm a planner in the advertising industry, and I'm married with 2 kids. No dogs, no pets. So I'm going to move sideways. So I'm going to go to Sarah next.
Sarah? I think you're muted, Sarah. Sarah, unmute yourself first.
Sarah, we can't hear you. There we go.
All right. So my name is Sarah Chi, and I'm married with 2 twin girls for now. One will be teen next week. So what I do for a living is I do social media metrics and measurement for the financial institutions here in Canada.
Kayla? Go ahead, Mila.
There we go. Hi, everyone. I'm Mila. I am a director at a financial services firm in Montreal, Canada. I was a single mom for a long time. I have a 21-year-old daughter, and I'm in a common law relationship now. So that's basically it.
Perfect. Hessie?
I'm Hessie Jones. I work at our company with Amy. I am a older Gen Xer, mother of 2 kids, 1 teenager, 1 preteen.
Great. Thank you. Kristen?
Hi, everybody. I apologize in advance. My internet has picked tonight to be not as good as it normally is. Anyway, I'm Kristen. I work in social media, and I actually have 2 kids. I'm married. I have 2 kids, 1 teenager and 1 elementary age, and a dog and a cat also.
And Amy.
Hi, I'm Amy Tobin. I am a single mom with a 7-year-old, an English Bull Terrier, and a cat. And I work with Hessie, at our company. And I live in Florida, so I'm laughing at Lori's hatred of extreme.
Oh man, really? Okay, we could have a whole conversation around the cold, because we've already touched on it with Mila, who is in Montreal suffering with us. But instead, you know, one thing I thought would be good is if we could get a little bit more context around our family structures. So what is different from your parent structure? So are you the first generation to be working versus stay at home? Did you have your kids later than your parents? Do you have a different sort of education structure type of thing? So if I were to sort of demonstrate with myself, I'm the first working mom in thousands of years of stay-at-home moms. Even though my own mom, consulted on the side, she was predominantly stay-at-home. So it was sort of an interesting dynamic within our own family. You guys, as we like to keep this fun and informal, anyone can speak. We don't have to keep laddering to the left. So if there's someone that would like to talk about their structure first, hop in.
I'll go. If anything, I have less jobs than my parents did. They worked very, very hard, both of them, outside the home, and having more than one job at a time was not unusual. My family situation, there were some divorces and remarriages and that sort of thing. And so it was always about which job they were working at. So in my case, it's just a matter of having the luxury of having one main job, vice numerous ones.
Mm. Kristen, was your family, were they entrepreneurs, or was it, when you say multiple jobs, it was
No, they had divorces and children and bills to pay. It was more of a lower middle class, more traditional, working in offices type arrangement. So there was no family business or anything like that going on. It was just going to work and taking care of business.
Right.
I'll go.
Okay, Amy.
So I was raised in a whole different generation because my grandmother raised me, and she was born in 1907. So she was retired, but they farmed like a lot of families did back then. You farmed anyway, even if you had jobs. So she was a school teacher who graduated in 1925. But then I went away to boarding school when I was 9 and lived there at a school for disadvantaged children. So totally my grandmother worked and had a career and was into education, but I didn't have any kind of model because our house parents that ran the student homes, that's their whole job. They didn't do anything else but raise 14 kids that they didn't that they were not related to. So an odd one.
Interesting. Very interesting. Anyone else?
I'll go.
Oh, Sarah, please.
Okay, so I guess I'm a first working mom in my family as well as my husband's family. We are also first, how do you call it, generation of immigrants here in Canada. So both my girls are born here. So they have totally a different, background and thinking than what I have. What else?
Working structure, education. Did you have kids later than in life, or?
I think I had kids late. It's probably around mid-30. So I was kind of somewhat established in my career. Then unexpectedly, we had kids. So then I think I took a sidetrack, not totally stay at home, but work part-time or, in a consultant or freelance space, just so I have the flexibility to look after the kids when they were little. But now I'm back full-time.
Right. Anyone else before we move to the next question?
Oh,
yeah.
I can give just really quickly. My background was a little bit different. My mother is a scientist. She still is, and she could work at home sometimes depending on her different projects. We traveled a lot, but she had my grandmother with us all the time. So even though she might have been out of the house working, we always had someone at home, my grandmother, kind of like a second mother for us. And my father also worked, and he owned his own company. So it was what I've done is in the past several years, I've worked various different jobs, either working for a company or doing consulting on my own. But I know that the experiences for my daughter were totally different. And on a side note, I feel really guilty. I forgot to mention I have 2 incredible little dogs, and so if I don't say that as part of my family structure, I'm going to be thrown out a window. I can't even believe I forgot them. They're so wonderful. So, so that's it.
Very inclusive. Very inclusive. I do want to move to the next question, and I'm going to get to you, Kristen, because I know we didn't hear from you yet. But I thought we'd move to an interesting question that Hesse talked to me about before the hangout. A lot of people had a little bit of a hesitation with joining a hangout on finances. So we thought, let's probe that a little bit and understand that, and whether or not there's some patterns between us on the hesitation to join tonight.
Yeah, and I want to specifically say that when we recruited for the first hangout, there was no hesitancy from the male side. They said, yeah, we could do that. That's no problem. But when we recruited, even discreetly, like within Messenger, somebody had brought up the point that there potentially could be this fear of being judged. So I want to kind of talk about that and see if we can get insights from you guys on specifically the female hesitancy about the topic of finance and spending. Why do you think that less women would?
Well, I think I would ask. You know what I want to know? Because I'm not hesitant to talk about anything, as you know. But who manages the finance? Because when I was married, I was actually married to a nice man for a couple years, and he did all the finances, and I absolutely loved it because I could just focus on my career. And you know that Sheryl Sandberg quote where she said the biggest career decision you'll make is the partner you choose in life? I wish someone smashed that into my head when I was young, because I didn't have to think about anything except my career, and I loved that. And then things changed. We got divorced, and all of a sudden I had to deal with it, and I hate it. I mean, I do it because I have no choice, and I hate it like I hated calculus. And to me, it isn't about anything to do with my self-esteem. I just am a right brain person. I don't know. But I have a lot of female friends who are extremely hesitant to talk about it, especially if they're older and have made some spending mistakes and they're alone. They're single, because it feels like you're judged because you're single, and then you're judged because you're not, in a set financial situation. So that's my 2 cents. And Kristen's shaking her head yes.
Okay, let's hear from Kristen then.
All right, I can take a stab at all of that. First of all, as far as being hesitant, I'm pretty transparent and pretty open book. But, I guess when it comes to finances, I haven't always executed what I know to be the right things. So there's the what you know is the smart move with finances, and then there's the what has actually been done. But I already decided to answer any questions honestly for the purposes of study here, right? And the other thing is, as far as who handles the finances, it has been both ways in my household. Of late, my husband is doing the finances, and that is largely due to the fact that he started a business, and that when it comes to finances, I'm a stress monger, and he knew that it's not that I don't have visibility, but having the control over the finer points of the business and how that intermingles with our personal finances, that my head might explode. So we have an arrangement currently where he is, for the most part, in charge of the finances, and it's been a great stress relief for me. I feel somehow negligent about it, but it's kind of the working arrangement that we have right now.
You know what's interesting? Last time when we had done this, what the 2 guys said on the panel was that their wives actually manage all the finances. And so while they may be, and one of them was, he was an entrepreneur and his wife was also working, but he said he doesn't want to deal with it. He said, well, they bring in the income, she manages it. And the one other gentleman who was the sole income earner, he passes that all over. So all of that he passes over to his wife. So it's interesting how the roles kind of reverse, because my husband manages the finances by default.
Because he's an accountant.
Yes, that's true. And I prefer that he does it because he reconciles the bank account every month, which I refuse to do. But for the most part, we have separate accounts. So anyway,
well, that's interesting to me. Like the separate accounting, I've managed the finances, and I haven't. And frankly, I think it's a huge chore to do it. So but you know, I was in sales for most of my career, and we were constantly schooled that women manage 85%. Well, women make the decisions on 85% of all consumers' goods bought in the U.S. And I'm sure that's not as true as it was because men have become more involved. But women make a lot of spending decisions, whether or not they're actually writing the check or not. So I wonder, you know, is that true in your household? And do you want to manage the?
As someone in advertising, I think that is an assumption that no company has ever checked. I'll be honest. This 85% decision making, I don't believe it for a second.
Well, I was in an industry totally around interior design, carpet industry.
No. I mean,
and it was totally true back then. I think it shifted a lot. Like men are more involved in those decisions now.
I just want to touch on something. When you guys say finances, do you mean managing expenses? Like paying the bills? Are you talking about savings for the future? All of it? What are you talking about finances? Or is it divvied up between those things?
I meant all of it.
All of it? Okay. It's all of it for you, Amy.
What?
And it's all of it for you, Amy, because you're
I meant when I was thinking of it, like when I was married, it was my, you know, the bills and where we were putting our saving. I guess it's all of it, you know.
Okay.
I guess it was all of it. I was thinking more of like, I hate writing the bills out. I hate doing all that. But it is everything. Yeah.
Now, I want to turn to Mila and Sarah. How about you guys in terms of the hesitation you might have had? Is it the same as Kristen? Did you have hesitation?
I definitely had hesitation, and it was based on not being sure if my point of view was necessarily going to be relevant. Having been a single mom, I wasn't sure. You know, you never really get a sense. Obviously, I have friends. I can see where they're at in their lives, but there's a bit of a difference when you have a 21-year-old versus someone who's a teen or earlier. And it's funny because I gave it a lot of thought, you know, because I thought, well, maybe I should mention, I don't know if I'm really going to be relevant. But I thought about some of my friends and all those things, and I think what I came to and why I decided that I'd really like to participate, and I thought it would be really interesting to share some different point of view and hear what other people are also thinking, because it's not something you really talk about. I mean, this is a pretty large discussion that we don't really hit with our friends every day as a generalized discussion. Is that I think one of the biggest things that I'm seeing in our generation is that everyone has kind of this mixed background, you know, but everyone seems to kind of be coming to the same places at the same time, which to me is much later than the previous generation and much later than the current generation. Like when I compare, and you know, it's not to say.
Wait, what do you mean by that? What do you mean later than the current generation?
Later in life. I think that we're reaching our goals and our dreams a little bit later in life. I think that the earlier generation
from an economic point of view, because the millennials I deal with, which are a lot of them, feel like they're way behind where we were at their age, financially, way behind.
It could be, and this may be something that I'm not. This may be one of my different experiences. It may be also a different experience in Canada, but I don't know. I employ a lot of millennials, and they seem to be in the same place financially that I'm getting to now, you know, but there's a huge age difference. And when I look at my other friends, they seem to be in a similar place financially that I am in now, even though they have younger kids than I do, obviously. So I find that kind of interesting, and I think that for example, when you're buying your first house, right now, at least from what I've noticed, people are buying their first house at 20 years old, maybe 25 years old.
Not
Whereas
in the U.S. Not in the U.S. When I remember though, but that's interesting though, because I remember when I was 30, there was a number, you're supposed to buy your house by the time you're 34, and I felt this tremendous pressure to like get a house by then. And the millennials I deal with, they don't even have a number because they don't think that it's possibly going to happen. But I mean, they all have huge student loan debt, huge, tremendous student loan debt. That's interesting. So when did you think you had to buy a house?
Oh, sorry, Amy. I thought we could move on to Sarah. Sarah, did you have a hesitation?
I never do. And I can tell a little story about myself. So when I was in my 20s, I was definitely a spender. So I max out my credit card. I only pay the minimum. I don't mind paying the interest. I'm like, what the heck? I buy what I want. To a point that I think I can't remember how much debt I accumulated. So it's actually my husband, boyfriend back then, he kind of taught me a lesson saying that if you don't, improve your credit, if you don't pay off your debt, you're going to be miserable. So I think later on I kind of learned I really should just, if I do use a credit card, I should pay it off full amount. Try not to owe anything. Now move on to buying a house. We bought our house in our early 30s, and that was probably 10, 15 years ago. Mm-hmm. I don't think the millennials, at least in the GTA here in Toronto, that they can afford to do that right now, unless you are very, very disciplined person, that you stick to your goal. But I have not seen that in many of my millennial friends in my circle.
Well, part of it, Sarah, is also the standard of living here in Toronto, and the rising costs of housing here is huge,
insane.
One thing I wanted to add, and it's funny, Sarah, when you talk about your husband giving you lessons. My husband actually gave me, when I was trying to save way back when, and this is part of learning how to manage your own finances when you're actually coming out of school. He basically told me, if you ever want to learn how to save, he said, treat your bank account, save up the first $1,000, and then treat that first $1,000 as zero, and try not to go below it ever. Because first of all, that's where you manage your, the fees, the bank fees, where you'll never get charged. And the minute that you hit that 1,000, you will start saving like you wouldn't believe. And he said after that, you'll want to save 2,000, then 3,000, and whatever. And it took me 2 years after paying off my loan to be able to get to that point. So
interesting. Well, so one of the things you said, Hessie, I thought was very interesting. It's like, who taught you finance, right? So for you, it was your husband.
Yes.
I think someone else, Kristen, you said your parents, which is the same as me. Sarah, it was your boyfriend at the time, now husband.
Beloved husband, yes.
Mila and Amy.
Did they sit you down and say, like, the birds and the bees, but we're going to talk about finance? Because no one ever did that to me. We weren't allowed to have money on our person at my school. We weren't even allowed to have an allowance.
Oh. Is that because it was a group home, like a group?
It was a very military-style, extremely strict place, and it was it's one of the things I complained the most about at the school, because I'm very connected to it, is we didn't learn anything about money, and so everything was free, everything was provided for. I never wanted for anything because it was very wealthy, and then all of a sudden I'm out in the world and I have thousands of dollars in a bank account because I saved my Social Security and my workman's comp because my dad died on the job was saved up, and I had no clue. No one had ever taught me anything about finance. And I think that's true in a lot of lower income families because there's no money, so there's nothing to talk about. Saving? Are you kidding me? We're trying to buy milk every week, Well,
I think it's also true in the upper middle class as well, because like you said, if you don't want for anything and everything is given to you, you don't really think about it. A lot of times you'll get your car for free, you'll get all kinds of stuff from your parents, from your family, and then eventually at some point they kind of say, well, you kind of have to do something yourself. So I think that challenge exists across all the social classes, if you will.
Right.
For myself, I really can't say that my parents taught me about money. If I needed something, I had it. I didn't worry about any of this. So I really, when I was out on my own, I just read about it. I would buy books and read about, how to save or how to handle debt. I think The Wealthy Barber was a book that I read that really spoke to me when I was really young. Yeah, and
I remember.
And it was like trial and error. Basically, you maxed out your cards, you realize, after 5 or 6 years, you realize, no, this isn't working, okay, I'm going to try again. So for me, a lot of it has been trial and error. And then, the whole while that you're doing that, I think if you haven't been taught about money in the home, you end up kind of having to chase yourself to try and get yourself to a good position unless you have some wealth that's supporting you. So I think it's an interesting situation to be in, and I think schools should definitely educate people. I know they have home economics and everything, but I really don't think that they need to cover a little bit more than the sewing and the cooking or whatever it was that was being taught.
Oh, exactly. Gender, like, what is it with cooking an egg, right? You're going to figure it out eventually versus the mortgage. Excellent point.
Well, one thing as well, oh gosh, I almost forget it. I lost it. It's gone.
Oh my God, we're all on this cliffhanger now, Hetty.
I forgot what I was going to say, and it was a really
that all the time.
Stop.
Well, Amy, you had a point in the chat about entrepreneurial parents. Is anybody?
Well, I wondered. I wondered. Yeah.
Are you a product of entrepreneurial parents, or?
I wondered, Sean McGinnis said to me once that instead of sending his kids to college, he thought, because it's so expensive now, it's over $100,000, maybe he should just set them up in business. And I thought, God, that's kind of brilliant. And if you had someone teaching you about money and business when you're young, instead of, I don't feel like I had much career guidance at all. Like, wow, I always think, where would I be right now if I had that,
Okay, so you are hitting on our next question, Amy. Excellent transition. So this idea of savings, right? $100,000 for college. I want to understand a little bit about your attitudes and behaviors around like current consumption versus saving for your future. So if you're saving, like what are you saving for? Near term, long term, whatever you're comfortable disclosing on a public hangout, right? Savings. So.
I'll go.
Good, Sarah.
So I would say right now, saving for the kids' education is a big one. So luckily here in Canada, we do have the RESP, so we totally take advantage of that. Because I have 2 kids that are very close in age, so chances are they'll be in the college, for 4 or 5 years together. So that's a big burden for us. So besides saving for their education, then it's saving for our retirement. Then again, take advantage of the RESP and all those vehicles that are available.
Are you going to pay the whole kit and caboodle for your kids?
We're going to pay the tuition. This is, by the way, this is just a Chinese parents' way of doing it.
Okay.
So we pay the tuitions. Anything that's entertainment money, they have to earn for it. So
I like this Chinese parent bit.
Can I add though, because Sarah, your kids, do they go to a normal school or private school?
The school right now.
Which one?
So they're middle school.
Okay.
Then some are in Brampton, yeah.
Okay.
So in different programs, yeah.
So public school.
Public school, yes.
Maybe it's because I thought I saw them wear uniforms. I just assumed that it was either a Catholic school or a private school.
They were in Montessori and private school for good years, and we pulled them out for various reasons. One, of course, because we couldn't afford it. Two is that I do find that when they get older, I want them to be in the larger setting of school. Private school is usually smaller scale. Where in private school, your class size is much bigger. So that's two of the main rationales that we pull them out of private school in the public school system.
Interesting. Okay. Now, Mila, you've got a 21-year-old, right?
Yeah.
So you must be in the thick of this right now. Like, are you how's the college going, or are you paying for school?
We're lucky as well in Quebec that our education is really it's really very reasonable. I mean, I don't think anyone can complain about it. I think that most people can go to university. It's probably like a couple of $1,000, a semester. It's really nothing. So in that regard, it really hasn't been a huge issue. I think that if I was living in the States, I really don't know. I don't know how I would have saved up $20,000-$30,000 a year at this point in my life to be able to offer that to her. I know for myself, I had student loans, and I've just recently been paying them. I'm almost completely done now. So, I mean, it's kind of interesting to see that. Like, I'm trying to give her an opportunity where she's not going to have student loans. Her dad helps out with that as well. So, I mean, we're fortunate there. But it's nothing compared to what's happening in the States. I mean, I can't even imagine. And in regard to her earlier education, I did the same thing as Sarah. I had her in a private school. Probably up until the time she was 9. We traveled a bit. So we were in the States for a while. She went to school there. And when we returned from that, we'd used whatever money I would have had for private school. We'd used it in our travels. So she went into the public school system from that point on. So I kind of find that interesting. And it was, when the time came where maybe I questioned whether we should put her back in a private school. Mm-hmm. It didn't make sense financially, so it's I think it's kind of interesting that Sarah is going through a similar thing.
So I'd love to hear from some Americans. Kristen, are you in the U.S.?
I am. I'm in Fort Worth, Texas.
Okay, perfect. So Kristen and Amy, this idea of $100K for college, the situation, the affordability is quite a bit different. So what are your thoughts there? Savings.
I am absolutely not going to steer my children down that path, not intentionally.
Now, what path is that? Going to college at all, or not?
No. I mean, I don't mean that. I just mean I want them to be results focused, and I'm not going to shove college down their throats for the sake of. What I want to help them do is figure out what it is that they want, and then, I'm not anti-college. I think it really depends on what your goals are. But I know a lot of people, a lot of my peers, and a lot of people younger than me that have incurred massive amounts of debt and have had a harder time getting a job than I have. So I think it's about the big picture. Now, if one of my children decides that they want to be a physician or, something that requires years of education, an attorney, something like that, then we'll get it done. We'll get it done. But it's not going to be just about the piece of paper. I want them to be more circumspect than that.
Yeah. Amy?
Yeah, and I grew up my grandmother demanded I went to college. There was no alternative, and I thought I would be the same way with Addie, but for the same reasons that Kristen says. Wait, Laurie, click on Kristen because she's stuck. Sorry, that's why it's stuck on her. Anyway, no, click on the person that's stuck. Anyway, sorry. When Sean said that to me, the thing I repeated about setting someone up in a business, it really took me back because the work I've done with millennials, I could blow your mind with some statistics, but the average millennial graduates with $30,000 in student loan debt at a 6.8% interest rate. So when I graduated, the average was well under 10 with a 2.8% whatever interest rate. You know, it used to be cheap to go to school here. And I actually went to college overseas where it was much less expensive. I went to college in Scotland. And so when Addie gets that age, I mean, she's very bright and I'm very scholarship focused and I'm considering private school after elementary. I'm very lucky to be in a great public elementary school. But if I pay for private school after elementary, I have not planning on paying anything for college. And I would look at alternative places to go to school. I would look at Canada. I would look at the UK. I would look at Europe. I am not going to burden her with thousands of dollars in debt in any way. And if she doesn't get a scholarship, then we'll find some alternative way of education. But I actually think there's going to be a revolution about it in the U.S. I think that Elizabeth Warren's really hitting on something really strong, and we're absolutely effing this generation. You know, with a 6.8, the government made $59 billion on student loans last year.
Yeah.
This is unsustainable. So I hope that by the time she's at that age, there are many alternatives. But I'm with Kristen, and this is somebody, I have 2 masters. I'm so proud of my education.
Yeah.
And I fought really hard. Now my school paid for it. You know, that boarding school I went to paid for my bachelor's because it's part of it. It's an amazing place called Milton Hershey School. But I graduated with a master's with only $9,000 in debt. Like, something's upside down here.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it changes everything about the way we see it. But, you know, I thought, so Hessie's niece is on my millennial think tank, Samantha, and with the numbers she was giving me for education in Canada were astronomical too.
Yeah.
Right, Hessie? So I don't, is it different in Quebec?
Yeah.
Is it?
Yeah, Quebec is very different. Quebec is almost its own country. I mean,
well, I'm moving to Quebec then.
Well, Gila agrees. Like, I mean, in the rest of Canada, like even provincially, they are different. But you know, Quebec, it takes care of its people, and I love the kind of funding it provides for its citizens. But Ontario and all the other provinces, they're different beasts. And they can be just as expensive to go to school as in the U.S. Like, I don't know, Lori, when the last time when you graduated, but the difference between when I graduated, it was like I think it was $4,000 per semester for tuition,
Yep.
And then on top of that, it was.
So Mila, you live in Quebec,
Right.
so that's why your millennials have a different attitude and a different place in life if they have no debt when they graduate. Like, it changes everything about where you think you can get to.
It's not to say they don't have debt, because a lot of the Quebec residents will go to college in Ontario or other places. So I mean, it's not as though just because you're here you're going to stay here. A lot of them leave. But if you are here and you don't have the option to leave, there is education that you could have here in certain fields. Like, for example, there are fields that are not specialized here, so a lot of people will go to Queens, or they'll go to out west, for art school or whatever it is. So I mean, we do see that. And let's say if my daughter decided that she had wanted to study art like my sister in Vancouver, well, that would have been a $40,000 a year adventure, but here in Quebec, because my daughter happens to be studying social services, she's already gotten 1 degree, she's going for another one. Our structure is a bit different. It's very inexpensive, and in fact, right now, what she's doing is she's going to be trying to go on an exchange to Europe, just to give you an idea, and the cost will be the same as here. So I find that amazing. So we'll help her out with that, but it's really not the burden that it would be in any other place.
Yeah.
So we're very lucky with that.
Very interesting. I think there's going to be, I agree with you, Amy. Something's going to happen. There's going to be a watershed. One thing I wanted to shift to, we're talking about savings. I think retirement is a little far away from us. The first sort of Gen Xers are just going to hit age 50, I think, next year, right?
Yeah.
So some of us may be starting to think about retirement. So does anybody have some attitudes on retirement? Like, is there a date in mind? Is it too early? Or are you just sort of throwing stuff into a bucket? Anyone thinking about retirement?
Never. I'm an entrepreneur. I have no choice. But I live in the land of, I live in Florida, so I'm surrounded by this, you know, silent generation and boomer retirees, and a lot of the boomers don't fully retire. But this concept of like golfing every day and that stuff, not only can I not do it, I can't do it if I wanted to, but I don't want to. Like, I feel like a lot of Gen Xers want to keep working because it's interesting and fun, and like my friends don't talk about retirement. They talk about what I'm going to do. Like my friend who works at the American Cancer Society, it's a great job. She's making great money. She cannot wait to retire so she can start her own nonprofit, right? Like I think that's what I hear, but that's me.
So there's a transition. Maybe the actual place of work changes, but you're still engaged, right?
Yep.
But I think it depends on, and it's like what Amy says. Like, I mean, your idea of work and your idea of life, they could be intermingled. So if you love what you do, it's like what they say, do you call it work? And does that become different than, you know, does that become a different definition of retirement? Maybe not.
Anyone else?
If I could say something on that.
Yeah.
I find it really interesting because I'm constantly what people call working. Okay, I'm constantly working. I love it. I don't consider it working. I have discussions with the older generation constantly where they say, you've got to stop working. Why are you doing all this stuff? You know, what's all this stuff you're doing? Don't you want to rest? Don't you want to? And to me, anything I do is not work. I enjoy what I'm doing. To me, the extent of work is the part where I actually have to walk into the office and stay there. So I think what Amy is saying is a lot of what I'm seeing, feeling myself as well. I think our generation maybe understands that we can enjoy what we do, and I think we're a lot more likely to be entrepreneurs. That's been my experience anyway. So I find it really interesting because the other generations don't seem to see that. They don't seem to get that. They're headed to retirement.
You mean older ones? Yeah, I mean, I'm in Florida. Like, these people do nothing but like get up
They're all
and golf.
Canadian.
And I'm like, they are all Canadian.
They're from Quebec.
They're from Ottawa. I'm surrounded by Ottawans, or whatever you call them.
Ottawa.
And they golf and they go to lunch and they take care of the yard. And I'm like, aren't you bored yet? You know?
They're all government workers.
Yes, and police officer. I'm not kidding. Teacher. It's exactly right.
Totally. I grew up in Ottawa. Full disclosure.
Or what's the big telecom that Bob worked for?
Nortel?
There's Bell, there's
Bell. No, not Bell.
Okay, it's not Nortel because no one has money left from Nortel.
Yeah. No, a lot of those people that worked at, I guess it was Bell, whatever. Anyway.
I have a question. Am I crazy for just not even being able to picture retirement? It's not even a question of I don't want to. I don't know if I will want to. I can't. That's not a scenario that I can envision.
And why can't you envision it? Is it like an age thing, or?
I don't know. I mean, obviously, you know, you work hard, you try to save money. Eventually, at some point, you'll retire at some time, right? At some point, you'll just lose the ability to keep hustling. But this is, of all the things that I've been able to picture in my mind or plan for or think ahead to, I can't see it.
Okay.
I can't visualize it.
Okay, can you see, like, for me, one thing I see is if I look at my ability to earn income, at what point am I at my peak, and at what point am I going down in my life? Is there an arc?
Well, that's how we got hosed, Laurie, is that I was making a ton, and I was 39, 40 years old, and the recession destroys my industry, and I get laid off. I think that happened to a lot of us. So and I know every generation got nailed by the recession, but I think where we really got nailed is a lot of us got nailed at our peak earning time. So when we were finally going to start to coast and do all those things that Mila's, you know, like, hey, I can finally get there. I can finally spend the money and take the big vacations and do all that. Boom. So this is when the boomers made their money, and yeah, it hurt their retirement. But why are you laughing at me? Anyway.
I'm laughing because we were all nailed.
We were.
And not in the way we want to be.
Hey, man, I left IBM to go to the housing market.
Oh my God, I was in the housing market.
And then it went,
and I left it to go to the social media market.
which was a good which was a good choice, right? But I think that's the whole thing. And Mila, you said this when you know, millennials are making, let's say, just as much as you are even now, and we expected, and if I'm paraphrasing, please correct me, but I think that the thing is that we've either gone backwards in terms of income, and so we kind of have to start not all over again, but we're not at the potential that we expected to be based on the expectations of our parents or the previous generation. We literally have to kind of regroup and figure it out, and just kind of play it by ear.
Mm-hmm. So enough about savings. Let's talk about spending. What do you spend on? What do you consider luxury? Let's go to the most extreme case. What's luxury for you?
Apple products.
Oh, yeah?
I was thinking of switching, and they're so outrageously more expensive because I've been a PC person forever because I hate the cult of Apple in so many ways. And I was like, are you kidding me? $2,000 for a laptop? I bought my Asus for $257, right? Yeah.
Yay, Asus. I love Asus too.
Anyone else? Luxury.
Has anybody gotten one of those, I don't know, the midlife crisis car yet? Or do women do that?
I bought one of those years ago, but I think you're echoing, Hess. I want to say something about this because, is it me? When I was selling really high-end product, and we were selling this BS during the peak that everybody wants luxury now. You know, we pointed out the washing machines, you know, the side-by-side gorgeous, ridiculous washing machines, and everybody wanted a Viking range, and that was our spiel because I was selling such expensive product that luxury is affordable to everyone and everybody wants it. And I mean, we really bought into that. That's how the bubble happened. And now it's like if I went back to that world, I laugh at myself because to me, luxury now is like going to Starbucks or going to Marshall's and buying some like Riedel wine glasses for $50 instead of, you know, I never go to department stores anymore. I know your Marshall sucks, Canadians, I'm sorry, but ours is incredible. Like luxury to me is small things like being able to go out to dinner and splurge and get a nice bottle of wine. It's very different. Like I used to drive a $65,000 vehicle. Like that is so stupid to me now. Like I want to go back and smack my pre-recession self, you know? So it totally changed my concept of luxury.
I love this. Okay, anyone head nod to that? I think I saw Kristen head nod.
Yeah, I'm head nodding. I think there are levels of luxury. You know, to me, anything that isn't food and clothes and roof is luxury. But then some of those luxuries are like super important luxuries, right? I drive a 15-year-old car that I happen to love, and I'm not getting a new one because I love my car. But we have a brand new Harley-Davidson motorcycle that is totally a luxury, you know, ridiculously expensive. But we spend a lot of time on that. And so I see that as being, it's a luxury, but it's one of the first ones we're going to get.
It's also an experience, though, because riding a bike is an experience, right? It's different than a vehicle.
And it's our, like, one thing that's not about work or the kids. So we're clinging to that. We still have some life left kind of notion.
That's wine for me. The one thing that isn't about work or the kids is wine.
No, but Kristen, also, I hear, like, especially with Harleys, that it's more of an investment. Doesn't, if you take care of it, it appreciates in value, does it not?
I'm not buying that. I mean, you know, my husband can say that, and maybe it's true. I'm not buying that. I see it as totally an investment in our memories, in our life, in our friends.
Did your husband actually try to convince you of that, though?
You want to know who wanted to buy the Harley? It was me. We had one that was used, and it, you know, had mechanical problems, and they're so expensive, and they do hold their value that when it was time to go and look, you know, normally I would have bought a used one, but they're so expensive to buy used that I thought, well, we might as well get the new one because then at least it has the really good warranty, and if it breaks down, they have to tow us, and blah, 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 blah. And I was actually the driving force behind that, and I'm the one who doesn't like to borrow money, doesn't like to spend money, but that's an important life element for us. So.
Can we probe on that just one sec? I want to ask Kristen about that, about borrowing. Because that's something that you brought up before. And why is that? Why is that a value for you?
When I was young, like a few of us, I think maybe share this. When I was young, I got in over my head with credit cards, and it wasn't that I was foolish and didn't understand the concept of having to pay them back, or that I couldn't do basic math. It was that it sort of just crept up on me. And I'm very big on accountability and responsibility, and that was the worst feeling ever, to have debt that I couldn't pay. And to this day, and things obviously have improved over the years, but then we took a hit with a house that we bought, and just the feeling of owing money is, to me, like one of the worst feelings in the world. I hate it. I may not have $1 million saved up, but I owe very, very little.
Why do you hate it? Is it because of the credit card debt and feeling foolish? Like, did you feel like that when you were a kid? Sorry, Lori, I can't control myself.
That's okay. Yeah, I guess maybe it's almost psychosomatic, like just the feeling of knowing that I owe someone money.
I want that disease. Like, I want that disease right there.
I have it. I really do. I may not be the world's best saver, not even close, but I am debt averse, and I don't like it. So.
That's interesting, because we were raised, like, we're close in age, like, this is the Reagan generation. Greed is good, Gordon Gekko, spend, and yuppies, and yeah.
I haven't heard that term in a long time. Sarah,
Yuppies?
I want to touch on Sarah, Mila, just luxury. What does it mean for you? You'll have to unmute yourselves, either Sarah or Mila.
Okay, I'm going to agree with Kristen on a little bit on the idea of luxury. What I was hearing when you were talking, Kristen, is that you just went for this Harley because it's fun, and I think what I personally find is things that are fun are luxury. Enjoying life is luxury. It's not to say it's unattainable, but I appreciate these things as luxury. So I don't take them for granted. If I plan a trip, I'm going to plan, a wonderful trip. I'm going to enjoy it, and I'm going to be all in for that, and those are my luxuries. When we bought our house, we had certain criteria that we wanted. I consider my house luxury because I decided to go into debt for it. And I kind of also feel the same way about debt as well. There was a period where I had all this debt. It wasn't uncontrollable, but there was, debt, and now I'm at a point where these debts are being paid off. I don't think I'm going to go out and buy a brand new car as soon as I've paid off mine, whereas for years, car after car after car, I wanted to always have a new car every 4 years. So I think there's something changing there where what I'm valuing in life is very different. It's enjoyment of my family, my dogs, traveling. These are, having a nice dinner with friends, having some wine, like Amy said, nice bottle of wine. These are all things that are luxuries. They're not unattainable, but they make me happy. And I think a lot of people in our age group are starting to find happiness in more simpler things. It doesn't have to be excessive. You don't have to be, way over the top all the time. We could be, but I think some of the choices that we're making now are that we don't have to be, and that's okay.
Right. Well said. Well said. Sarah?
I say this, that sounded like a millennial speech. Like, this is where this generational generalizations are really BS, because I think the recession made all of us think about what's important, right? Like, what's really important. And it isn't the washing machine and the Viking stove. It's good time with friends, and it's the small, and it's having time, like the Harley time. I think the recession changed everybody. Except maybe those greedy boomers. No, I don't know.
Okay, Sarah?
What do I deem as luxury? I think the wishful thinking is that I don't have to worry about money. I totally agree with Kristen that I hate, in debt, owe any people that money. But I know that, don't have to worry about money is wishful thinking. So for me, I think right now the luxury would be if I could just travel around the world with the family for 2 months and don't have to worry about anything. That would be my luxury.
You know, it's funny now that I listen to you all, and Amy, it's good that you brought that up. That millennials think the same way. When we ask the same question to let's say Brian Carter and Ryan Pinnell in the last finance and spending hangout, I still remember Brian's quote, and he said, "I don't want to have a great life. I want to have a great week." And so he talked about
I love that. Yes, that was
having
awesome.
enough money, not money, but putting a bunch of books in his Kindle. And we talked about cheeses. Remember expensive cheeses? He wanted to buy the feta cheese one day. And for Ryan, it was about finally having the time and the luxury to spend with his kids. And so we become a lot more family oriented as a result of the recession. So we start to really delve into the values that we should have had. I don't know whether or not the recession changed us or whether or not we became better as a result of the recession. So
we need to do a blended panel on this with everybody, with boomers, Gen Xers, and millennials all in one, talking about this very thing.
Yeah, I think so. It'd be interesting to see how the boomers are faring on this very topic. I know we did one on that, but anyway, Lori, did you want to do any closing remarks before we sign off?
Well, this has been terrific, guys. I think I've seen a number of patterns. I think we've all sort of nodded our heads, and there's even a few differences between Canada and the U.S. Really, I just wanted to leave us. We have 2 minutes left. Anybody has some closing thoughts and anything else to add before we end? No? Okay. Then that's it. Really.
So thank you, everyone.
When's our next one, and what's it on?
Is in 2 weeks. We're still trying to figure out topics just because we're kind of on the cusp of 2 of them that are really cool. So we'll determine what that's going to be. But if you guys want to hang out for a few minutes after I stop the broadcast, please do. In the meantime, for everyone else, thank you for joining us, and we'll see you in a couple weeks. Take care.